The Eight Immortals Travel East Chapter 1.
Usually when we look at an origin story, there's a very specific, familiar trajectory.
Right, the classic hero's journey.
Exactly. Someone starts out ordinary, they hit a massive limitation, and then through some catalyst, they get power.
Yeah, it's an upward curve. You gather strength, you get allies, you build up this armor to face the world.
Right. But today, we are exploring an origin story that entirely inverts that formula. It turns it completely upside down.
It really does.
Today's mission is to unpack the genesis of one of the most famous figures in Chinese mythology. We're working with a translated excerpt from Chapter 1 of the classic Chinese text, Journey to the East, or Dong Yuji.
And what we find in these sources is just this profound, almost mind-bending narrative.
Yeah, it's about the systematic dismantling of a perfect life in the pursuit of ultimate truth. It reads almost like a superhero origin story, but with these incredibly deep philosophical undertones.
It is the absolute definition of a reverse trajectory origin. And the source material actually establishes this tone immediately with a Dian Jiangshan poem.
Right, which is a classical format designed to evoke a very specific sort of ethereal mood.
Exactly. You get this striking imagery of flowing water, drifting clouds, barking dogs, and flying cranes riding the wind.
The atmosphere it creates is just haunting. The flowing water and drifting clouds set up this feeling of effortless existence.
Yes, very serene.
But then it grounds you with the barking dogs before pulling your eyes right back up to the flying cranes.
And it all culminates in this lingering question asking where the eight immortals are.
Which is essentially asking you, the listener, to look past the everyday noise of the world and wonder where true transcendence has actually gone.
That tension, between the mundane or earthly realm and the divine, that's the central axis of the entire narrative we're about to explore.
So let's talk about the immortals themselves.
Right. So when you look at the legendary roster of the eight immortals, Zhongli, Dongbin, Guolao, Lan Kai, Hexianggu, Hangxiangzi, and Kalguaju, you're looking at this incredibly diverse tapestry of archetypes.
But the text focuses squarely on their leader, Tieguai.
Yes, Tieguai.
Whose name translates to Iron Crutch. And anyone familiar with the iconography knows exactly who this is.
Oh, absolutely.
He's universally depicted as a limping, disheveled, older man leaning heavily on an iron crutch. But the text immediately drops this massive twist regarding his identity.
It's a huge reveal. Iron Crutch is just an alias.
Right.
It's a later nickname for what the text calls his fake body. His real name is Li Xuan.
And his original form was nothing short of flawless.
The description of young Li Xuan paints a picture of absolute physical and mental perfection. The text says he was tall, sturdy, and notably described as embracing the elegant kai of the five elements.
Wow, embracing the elegant kai. What does that signify?
It signifies a state of complete spiritual and physical equilibrium. He wasn't just healthy. His internal architecture was perfectly harmonized with the fundamental forces of the universe.
And he had the intellect to match.
Wow.
Right? The text highlights a clear mind that naturally understood the mysteries of heaven and earth.
Exactly. He had every conceivable advantage. He possessed the kind of innate understanding that other ascetics spend lifetimes trying to achieve through grueling meditation.
He was essentially born with the cheat codes to the universe.
That's a great way to put it. He really was.
Okay, let's unpack this because there is a massive disconnect here. If you have a character with maxed out stats, a perfect physical form, and unparalleled genius,
Yeah.
it makes zero sense that history remembers him as a limping old man. It's like having a famous online avatar that's a level 1 peasant when you actually own the entire game.
Right. It's baffling on the surface.
Something catastrophic or deeply intentional must have happened. Why would someone who has it all completely reject their perfect starting point?
Well, the rejection of that perfection is actually the prerequisite for his journey. His innate advantages were, in his eyes, a gilded cage.
A gilded cage.
Yes. And this realization hits him hard at the age of the weak crown, which is around 20 years old.
Oh.
In his societal context, this is the exact moment he is expected to step into his predetermined role. Take over the family estate, marry, secure his legacy.
But instead, he experiences a radical disillusionment. He completely rejects the family livelihood.
Total rejection. He turns his entire focus toward the great Dao and the pursuit of the golden elixir.
And his assessment of the society he is leaving behind is just brutal. He determines that the world is entirely empty and that human life is just an illusion.
He utilizes these incredibly violent and visceral metaphors to articulate this worldview, too.
Like what?
Well, worldly passions and everyday desires are not just distractions to him. He calls them axes chopping at true nature.
Axis chopping at true nature, geez.
Yeah. So every time a person yields to a desire for societal approval, a promotion, or material gain, Li Xuan envisions an axe taking another chunk out of their fundamental pure soul.
That is intense. And he takes aim directly at the concepts of wealth and fame, calling them poisonous wine that confuses the mind.
Poisonous wine. It's such a brilliant comparison.
It really is. Because poisonous wine looks sweet, it goes down smooth, and it probably makes you feel powerful and untouchable for a fleeting moment.
Right, but structurally, it is destroying you from the inside out.
He even looks at the absolute pinnacle of human hierarchy, being an emperor with the wealth of the entire world, and dismisses it as a floating cloud.
Just a floating cloud. It's there for a second, casting a shadow, and then the wind blows and it's completely gone.
So his perspective is anchored in this core philosophical realization about the relentless churn of material existence.
Yes, he observes the inescapable cycle, beginning from nothing to have something, and having something that must become nothing. He recognizes that the game of acquiring wealth and fame is rigged because the prize itself is the poison. The more you win the societal game, the more of your authentic self is chopped away.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I have to push back a little bit on this.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there a danger of viewing this as just the ultimate ancient version of teenage rebellion? I mean, it's incredibly easy for a guy born with perfect health, immense wealth, and a brilliant mind to sit in his estate and declare that wealth is a floating cloud.
That's a very fair point.
Does he actually walk the walk, or is this just philosophical posturing? Because today we see people chase toxic success all the time, and it's easy to criticize it when you already have it.
And that is the crucial test for any figure making these kinds of grand declarations. But Li Xuan absolutely commits.
He really does.
He doesn't just theorize about the emptiness of the world from the comfort of a pavilion. He initiates a phase of extreme external action.
He goes completely off the grid.
Completely. He abandons his family, his friends, and all of his inherent privileges to cultivate truth in absolute punishing isolation.
The setup described in the text is staggeringly austere. He locates a quiet valley, takes up residence in a deep cave.
Just a cave in a valley.
Yeah, and he builds a makeshift door out of stones and weaves a mat out of thatch to sleep on. That is the entirety of his material existence.
And his process inside that cave is relentless. He engages in the arduous work of clearing his mind, gathering his K, and refining his physical form.
And for anyone who studies internal alchemy, gathering K isn't just taking deep breaths, right?
Not at all. It's the active, conscious circulation of vital energy through the meridians. He's attempting to fundamentally rewire his subtle body.
That takes an astonishing amount of cognitive load. I mean, the modern equivalent might be attempting the ultimate dopamine detox.
For sure.
Where people lock their phones in a drawer for a weekend and think they've achieved a higher state of consciousness.
Yeah.
But Li Xuan locks himself in a rock for years.
Yeah. The physical and psychological toll of this cannot be overstated. The text explicitly notes that his focus became so intense he forgot to sleep and eat.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Forgot to sleep and eat?
Yes. He is overriding the most primal survival instincts encoded in the human brain.
That's unbelievable.
To maintain that level of unbroken concentration for years without succumbing to madness or starvation, it requires a willpower that borders on the terrifying. He is systematically trying to transcend his physical shell through sheer unyielding discipline.
As awe-inspiring as that level of dedication is, this brings us to what feels like the most pivotal turning point in his early journey.
Right, because the strategy eventually fails him.
After years of this intense isolation, he hits an insurmountable wall.
He comes to a profound realization in the silence of that cave. He discovers that relying solely on his own mind, his own formidable willpower, and his own self-directed study.
It's just not enough.
Exactly. It's not enough to pierce the final veil of ultimate truth.
The source material uses two brilliant metaphors to describe this epiphany. He realizes he has been looking at the sky through a tube, or measuring the sea with a calabash.
Those metaphors perfectly capture the limitations of a solitary genius.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you look at the sky through a bamboo tube, the patch of blue you see is real. It's not a hallucination or a lie.
Right.
But your framework is so restricted that you miss the grand panorama, the movement of the weather systems, the vastness of the horizon.
And the calabash metaphor is similar.
Yeah, using a calabash like a small gourd to measure the ocean means you might eventually count every single drop, but you will fundamentally fail to understand the ocean's deep currents, its tidal shifts, and its hidden ecosystems.
He's realizing that his microfocus in the caves perfected his inner self, but it entirely blinded him to the macro mechanics of the universe.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why do even the most dedicated, brilliant, self-taught individuals eventually hit a wall where isolation stops working and mentorship becomes necessary?
Because a solitary mind can only rearrange the furniture in the rooms it already knows exist.
How do?
True mentorship is about someone else showing you that the architecture of your reality has an entirely different floor you never even perceived.
So if his own unmatched genius isn't enough, where does a guy like this go to find a mentor?
He sets his sights on Mount Hua to seek out two specific figures. He's looking for Lao Jun, who is essentially Laozi, claiming a shared spiritual lineage through their surname, Li.
And the other one?
A master named Wang Qi, a renowned figure of the Great Dao. Li Xuan had perfected his isolated room, but he needed these masters to hand him the blueprint to the rest of the universe.
He had to swallow his pride and humble his own intellect. Acknowledging that his perfect mind was actually a bottleneck is a massive leap.
It's a huge shift in his ego.
So he packs his bags, he leaves the cave, he begins this epic journey toward Mount Hua.
And the text describes him traveling day and night, wearing the stars and the moon, sleeping by water, and dining on wind.
But what's fascinating is that despite the urgency of his quest, he's not just grinding through the miles blindly. He is acutely observing the world he had previously abandoned.
His perspective has shifted significantly since his initial departure. During this journey, he pens a poem that encapsulates his evolved understanding.
This is the poem about the red furnace.
Yes, he writes about the red furnace of the mortal world. He says, "Who adjusts the great forge of the red furnace? It molds the skin bags to produce heroes. If a man recognizes the clever mechanisms, stepping out of the dust is true elevation."
Let's really unpack that forge metaphor. Calling the mortal world a red furnace is such a visceral way to describe human society.
It really is.
A forge is intensely hot, it's pressurized, and it's designed to temper metal, or in his blunt Taoist phrasing, to produce heroes from ordinary skin bags.
The pressures of society, the stress, the expectations, the constant friction with other people, the temptations. These are the bellows and the flames of the furnace.
Right, and when he first left society, he just saw it as a toxic environment to escape.
Exactly. But now he sees it as a mechanism.
That distinction is everything. If a man recognizes the clever mechanisms, if you walk into a forge blind to how it works, you just get burned alive by the heat.
You get totally consumed by the stress and the desire.
But if you see the machine for what it is, you can utilize that intense heat to harden your resolve, to temper your spirit. You let it burn away your impurities.
And crucially, you don't stay in the furnace once the sword is forged. If you linger in the fire too long, you melt into useless slag.
Wow.
Stepping out of the dust, stepping away from worldly attachments after you have used them to temper yourself, that is the true high ground. It's a much more sophisticated view of the world than his initial youthful disgust.
Carrying this new wisdom, he finally arrives at Mount Hua. And the text paints a majestic, almost intimidating picture of his destination.
The imagery here is stunning.
We're talking about towering peaks spanning 100 miles, dense green mist reaching up to the sky, and waterfalls so pristine they look like single strips of green silk.
He gazes at this place where the white clouds meet the jagged peaks, and he knows internally that this is exactly the kind of elevated environment where true sages reside.
The physical environment mirrors the spiritual altitude he is striving to reach.
It is the literal manifestation of stepping out of the dust and into the clouds.
But then we hit the final agonizing moment of this particular narrative arc.
It's such a tense moment.
It's evening. The text gives us this quiet, atmospheric detail. The mountain holds the new moon, and the smoke from evening cooking fires is gently rising from the dwellings below.
Beautiful scene.
So after abandoning his perfect life, after enduring years of sensory deprivation in a stone cave, and after walking hundreds of miles, he is finally there. The door is right in front of him.
And he stops.
He stops, dead at the foot of the mountain.
He assesses the situation and concludes knocking on the door at night would be the greatest disrespect.
So he just stays there.
He simply stays at the foot of the mountain, committing to wait in the darkness for the dawn.
I have to admit, from a modern perspective, this is agonizing to read.
It really tests your patience.
It's like sitting in a lobby for 12 hours before the most important job interview of your life, when the interviewer is literally just sitting in the next room.
Right.
Why stop precisely at the finish line? What does this deliberate pause tell us about the mindset required to actually receive profound wisdom?
Well, in our current culture, where we equate speed with efficiency and access with entitlement, his pause feels totally counterintuitive.
Definitely.
But consider the monumental shift in his ego. He is approaching the ultimate masters of his tradition. If he rushes up that mountain path and bangs on their door demanding enlightenment simply because he has decided he is ready,
He's still operating from a place of supreme arrogance.
exactly, he would still be letting his own schedule and his own burning desires dictate the interaction.
He'd still be acting like the privileged aristocrat who expects the universe to cater to his timeline.
By halting his momentum and waiting for the appropriate natural time to present himself, he is fully submitting to an order larger than himself.
He is emptying his cup before he asks the masters to fill it.
Beautifully said. It is the practical application of his realization about the tube and the calabash. He respects the rhythm of the mountain and the boundaries of the sages far more than his own impatience.
That quiet wait in the dark is the ultimate proof that the fires of isolation actually worked. He is finally genuinely ready to learn.